Hello, everybody. Quick video from me. Thought this one was interesting. I was looking at some of the feedback from the recent online events, specifically having a look at stuff like, "Oh my God, nerf three agility ships," or "Oh, this is broken and this is broken." Bit about game balance and how, especially in the recent online matter, we had the Nantex coming up, and there was a lot of things that were calling for a nerf bat. While doing this, I don't just play X-Wing, I follow quite a bit of League of Legends, and following League of Legends, I listen to quite a bit of podcasts, and was listening to the Crackdown. Shout out to I Will Dominate, and also some of Thorin's podcasts as well. Apart from being an angry Scottish man that's just really inflammatory, he does come up with some really good points. And I think that there's a lot of things that X-Wing, as quite a young game that doesn't really treat itself quite that seriously competitively, can take from some of these larger games, especially in the esports world. I just want to play you this discussion quickly and then have a bit of a talk about my thoughts on how we could bring some of this into the world of competitive X-Wing, because I think that some of these thoughts about balancing is something that the community should really think about and should be aware of.
Can you actually tell us any of the things that like you tried to implement, whether it's like a vague overview or some specifics if you want?
Yeah, fuck. Yes.
I remember specifically you were the one that like pushed back the crab changes from like the 2 minute to like 3:15, right? I remember you messaging, like, that was one thing that I liked about you being on the team, is you actually like would reach out to like a bunch of like the streamers and like pro players and stuff and try to like sample everything, so you'd have the data to like go through. It's like, yeah, I mean, this is something that like was thoroughly thought out. Like I feel like sometimes like there isn't enough surveying done of like the highest level players. I mean, I guess that's just my personal experience where like
highest level players like I Will Dominate law.
To be fair, Dom, if you want, we can get into that topic, because I do think that is a classic topic that if you have anyone who's involved in game design, you should talk about, which is like, look, here's the problem, right? I complain about balance all the time myself, because let's face it, first of all, it's just a fun thing to do, like water cooler talk, like, oh, this is broken, that's shit, you know. It's a fun thing to do anyway, it's just grumbling in it. But even if you make real, legitimate arguments, the main problem, as far as I can tell, goes like this. First of all, say it's someone like me, and I'm just watching the game, and basically what's frustrating me is I don't like how like a pro player's abusing something. So he's actually abusing it to an extent I'd probably never meet if I played low-level League of Legends solo queue, actually. So I'm already going to overreact to what the actual totality of the impact of the OP thing is. Then if you do it, Dom, you're also reacting to the fact that you play the game at a high level, so you're getting frustrated at certain things. But again, you're in a super small niche of people. Like, a lot of people aren't even seeing it to that degree. So one of the problems is when we come and bring our comments to the people who are in game design, or talk to Riot, or even just like speak to Riot without like a direct connection on the internet and hope they get the message. First of all, we are going to do it from frustration. So we're going to do it in such a hostile tone. Unfortunately, it doesn't like welcome people in to go, oh, I want to listen to this guy. If anything, you want to be like,
you got a Tyler one stream. Yeah. He's like, you know, this game is fucking dog shit, and everyone at Riot is an idiot. Yeah. And Jatt's like, okay, thank you, noted. All right, let's see. Like,
and then the other one is kind of along the lines of what he said about how like you have to like lock in changes and you have to figure out like one of the hardest things about the game design is that you aren't ever changing one thing. Changing one thing changes every other thing that interacts with that, including all the other champions, like concepts like which is stronger. Like, I'll give you an example. You know, famously, one of the reasons why people kept going on and on about how Genja was a Time Lord is because when he played the Trinity Force Cogmore, when it wasn't good, it was actually good, like something mad, like 4 or 5 months later, but without changes totally. And I believe it was because like some other item got nerfed or some other champions got nerfed, and that just made it by de facto. They got taken down, and it was just good then at that point.
Yeah,
like, that's confusing to a fan. Yeah, that's confusing to a fan. So basically, as far as I can tell, a lot of the things that like I might ask for individually for one champion, it's like whack-a-mole, mate. If I back that over there, I don't know what the effect is over here. Maybe it makes something else OP that might be even worse. So I'd like to hear some of Jatt's thoughts on this, because I know it's a lot easier to basically say like, this is broken, than it is to actually know how would I fix it, you know?
Yeah, it's like, oh man, it's kind of absurd how much you want to take into account. I was reading chat as well, so like I did a decent amount of outreach with like the network that I had, not to necessarily let people like dictate what was being changed, but more if I needed to just like gain information or gain context. So if we were trying to nerf like Tom Kench for pro play, trying to find out the things that are like uniquely strong about him in pro without making him unplayable in solo queue. So I talked to like Wadid or something, because at the time he had been like one of the best Tom Kench players. Or like I talked to you about Scuttle Crab. Sometimes people are like, oh, LS talked to Riot. Like I actually did talk to LS about certain things sometimes for game balance stuff.
Okay, so the rest of that discussion isn't really relevant to X-Wing, but there's a few really interesting things in there that I think we should have a look at. So, first of all, people aren't going to be coming at complaining or even their problems with the game from the same angle. There is so many people playing this game, and something that's definitely worth mentioning is the competitive aspect of X-Wing is a small part of the game. There is hundreds and hundreds and thousands of players around the world that have just bought a core set and having fun, right? So you have to bear them in mind when there is game design. You have to balance things in terms of that. If you are going to be changing anything on the website, there is a load of people that are advised to use through the box the official builder and will use the official builder for points. Those who are at least at the level where they would make a 200-point list, or even just in the 100-point list, they'll still use the official builder. So you have to take them into account as a large portion. And something that they might find difficult would maybe be something that you wouldn't even consider as a player who is halfway up the competitive ladder. Then we go to the next step. You've got people who play a 200-point standard game, but they play for fun. Like, they're not really attending tournaments, but they are playing the game as we play it at a tournament level. And some of the things that they might find overly broken and horrendous might just be day-to-day to a tournament player. For example, the broken Ray combo where she adds the Finn dice and gets 5 hits at range 1 almost every time. If you put that on a casual player's playmat, then they're going to be like, what the hell is this? This is obnoxious, this is horrendous. But when you're tweaking lists to the absolute maximum, this is something that is standard. So for the game dev team, do you remove that from the game? Do you point it out to the game because it's too broken? Or do you leave it there and allow the casual players to not really understand how that works and be able to use it, but it's okay at a tournament level because people understand how to counter it? Like, is that okay to leave in the game? So, and then finally, from a really competitive point of view, something that might be almost impossible to use. The Auto Blaster Anakin is a good example. He is a scalpel, or even Suntifel. If you don't point these ships appropriately, the standard player who plays against 7-ship swarm and plonks him right in front and then gets splatted feels like, oh my god, Suntir is too expensive. But if you make him too cheap, then in the hands of an ace player, who is right at the top of the game's skill tier, he will be ridiculously broken, and in competitive play will be busted for 3 months until someone figures out a way either to counter him completely or the game devs change the points. So there's all of these things that you have to be aware of. And when you do change something and you manage to get that right, well, once you've changed it, like as was mentioned, you're not changing this in a vacuum. It isn't just, oh, I'm just going to reduce the points on this thing, because when you reduce the points on this thing, you need to have a think about what's going to happen, what's going to fill the vacuum that you just left behind from getting rid of that obnoxious annoyance. And we saw this a little bit with the Nantex. So once the Nantex disappeared, there was a change in the metagame. Every single time there's a points change, you see this new game develop. And it's really interesting from a list building and a competitive standpoint. Just changing points slightly is a really good way of messing up the meta, but you have to be careful that some things that those lists were actually holding down aren't going to suddenly become obnoxious. I have this worry with Kanan at the moment, Kanan Jarrus. As soon as the ship count goes down, Kanan Jarrus becomes one of the most horrendous ships to play against in the game, because you're not allowed to play. You're just, okay, 2 of your ships every single turn just get their red dice reduced by 1. It's awful. So you have to be aware of all of these different things when you're balancing the game, and I think that's something that is very, very difficult for the devs to do. There was a large playtest community in FFG land before it switched over to AMG. I don't know whether or not they're going to continue that. And it's something that I did for a little while as well, so I'm aware of some of the difficulties and everything else, and sometimes you do get listened to, sometimes you don't get listened to, and maybe you're looking at it from a competitive point, but the game devs are just like, but this is really cool, so we want to put it in the game, because at the end of the day it is their game, and we're just players that are trying to help. So there's so many of these different aspects, and if you're going to go on and shout about, oh my god, this thing is the most broken thing, etc., 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 think about why that is and what changes could be brought into place, and what the possibility of the end goal is, and what could we learn from a game like League of Legends and the balancing that goes on there. Something that is done in League of Legends is they attempt to balance it from a few different standpoints. At the highest level, they're balancing for competitive play. Then you balance it for what's called solo queue, where people just play one-on-one, or teams on teams. Then you've got to balance it for the middle ground, and then the absolute doldrums of the real casuals, the militant casuals that don't really play but just have a good time. You don't want to make something unusable for them, so you have to make it at least accessible. Now, for a company that is small like AMG, this could be really hard to do. It would be unrealistic to expect that. However, this is where I think that we could use the quick build, extended, and hyperspace formats. I feel like you could balance for extended as the top tier, or hyperspace, or whichever one you want to use, but you could balance for the top tier of competitive play. You can then balance for casual, and then you can balance for nobody. So, for example, if you're just pew-pewing and throwing spaceships around, use quick build. Fantastic. But do that properly. Don't make some of the nonsense cards that are out there right now. Then you could have a casual 200-point format that maybe is hyperspace, and then you could have a completely broken, bonkers, but balanced at the top level extended format. Maybe that's what you do. Chuck me your thoughts below. I thought this was a really interesting discussion to have, and maybe a solution to some of the complaining that we're seeing online at the moment. And even if it isn't a solution, then I get to go and be angry at the internet and throw my voice into the ring. So let me know in the comments down below what you think. If you're interested in some more of these, then maybe chuck a like and a subscribe, and I can shill and do everything else.